Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunaham Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram Namah Shri Shankarananda Gurupadam Pujanmani Savila Samaha Moha Graha Grasaika Karmani. Okay, we'll read the verses that we covered last time. So from 24 to 31, we'll just review those. Nanu jnanani bhidyantam akarastu na bhidyate yoshit vapushyati shayaha na drishto jiva nirmitaha maivam mamsamayi yoshita kachidanyamanomayi mamsamayya abhedepi भिद्यते हि मनोमयि भ्रान्ति स्वप्नमनोराज्य स्मृतिष्वस्तु मनोमयम् जाग्रन्मानेन मे यस्य न मनोमयतेति चेत् बाढं मानेतु मे येन योगस्याद्विषया भाष्यवार्तिककाराभ्याम् अयमर्थ उदीरितः मूषासिक्तं यथा ताम्रं तन्निभं जायते तथा रूपादिव्याप्नुवच्छित्तं तन्निभं दृश्यते ध्रुवम् व्यञ्जको वा यथा लोकः व्यङ्ग्यस्याकारतामियात् सर्वार्थव्यञ्जकत्वादिः अर्थाकारा प्रदृश्यते मातुर्मानाभिनिष्पत्तिः निष्पन्नं मेयमेति तत् मेयाभिसङ्गतं तच्च मेयाभत्वं प्रपद्यते सत्येवं विषयौ द्वौ स्तः घटो मृण्मय धीमयौ मृण्मयो मानमेयः स्यात् साक्षी भास्यस्तु धीमयः. Okay, so here Swami Vidyaranya ji now poses a question. Says that in the example of a woman, you take a lady and you see her in different angles. Some will see her as a spouse, as a mother, as a daughter, as a friend. But the objection says, you may say that, but I don't see any actual other woman being created, right? How are you saying there's two creations? How are you saying there's jīva sṛṣṭi, which is the individual creation, and Ishvara sṛṣṭi, God's creation? How are you saying there's two when nothing happens to the woman, right? The woman is there. Yes, you're seeing her in different ways, but it's not like you're creating another being. So here in verse 25, it says, listen, there's what we call mamsamayi yoshit and manomai yoshit. Means there's the physical woman, but there's also the mental woman. There's a physical object, there's a mental object. There's a physical man, there's a mental man. So physically, they might appear one way, but mentally, our thoughts and emotions about them will be completely different. How a mother will feel completely different towards her child, even that lady, that lady, if she's a mother, she feels different for her child. And then as a wife, she would feel differently for her husband. And as a daughter, she would feel differently for her mother. And those people would feel differently for her. So we're talking about a creation that's not physical, it's mental. There's an Ishvara sṛṣṭi, there's a mental creation there. So there's a physical one and there's a mental one. Now the objection again says, I agree that there's mental creations, but mental creations only take place in these 4 instances. In verse 26, Bhranti in delusion, Swapna in dream, Manorajya in daydream, and Smriti in memory. I agree that mental creations take place in these 4 stages. Because in these 4 stages, or in these 4 states, you don't need a physical object. When you dream, you don't need a physical object, whether it's a dream and in the nighttime or daytime. When you're remembering someone, you don't need a physical object. And when we're deluded about something, we definitely don't need a physical object. So he says, I agree in those states, there is a mental creation. I agree. But in waking state, I still don't see how there's a mental creation. Because all I'm seeing is this bottle, right? I'm not seeing another bottle. So he says the mind really doesn't do anything in the waking state. Then the reply says, actually, the mind is the one that cognizes the objects in the waking state. So you might have a bottle here, but, and it's Ishvara sṛṣṭi, it's there. But the mind cognizes it. The mind actually envelopes it. And they give 2 examples, like a mold being poured into copper, or like light kind of pervading an object. So if the object is here, for us to even know it, some kind of mental modification has to take place. My mind has to envelope this object. And he gave 4 steps, right? So the first step is the reflected consciousness and the antakarana, right? Or the mind intellect equipment, they are together. And that's a natural step. Step 2 is it reaches the object. Step 3, it connects to the object. And step 4, it gives us that knowledge. It gives that knowledge, it takes the form and it gives us the knowledge. So whatever you say, there is a mental creation happening. Even just to know an object, you need a mental thought. You need a mental creation. You can't have any experience without thought. You have to have the thought. So based on these verses that say, listen, you have to have a thought to at least cognize this object. This is based on what Adi Shankaracharya ji says and Sureshwaracharya ji says. Then we establish that there are 2 kinds of creation. There are 2 kinds of creation. And he says Satyam. There are 2. One is called the mud pot and one is called the thought pot. So you can say bottle here. So one is called, let's say, a steel bottle, right? And one is called the thought bottle. So the steel bottle is what we call, it is based on the antakarana. The mind intellect equipment is able to know this, meaning my thought pervades this bottle. It takes the form of it, and then I understand this is a bottle. So to know the steel bottle, I need the mind. But to illumine the thought bottle, that takes place through sakshi. So in verse 31, it says here, there's, mrinmaya and dhimaya. So two objects. One is the steel bottle, one is a thought bottle. And that thought, that steel bottle is manamaya. Manamaya. The steel bottle is known through the mind intellect equipment. And then the thought bottle is known through sṛṣṭi. So in this way, he is just establishing that, listen, there are two creations. One creation is in the thought level, and it is where the thought envelopes Ishvara sṛṣṭi. And the other creation is where Sakshi illumines Jiva sṛṣṭi. It's two creations. And if you take, let's say, a building, you take a building that's built, and it's very, very beautiful building, newly built, has lots of nice bricks and tiles, and it's tall, it's wonderful, it's clean. Now the building doesn't know anything. It's a building. But let us say somebody said, now today it's your property. Somebody said to me, it's my property. And then I become very happy. Now that happiness is taking place where? In a mental thought, right? The building doesn't know that I'm happy. The building doesn't know that I own the building now. The building doesn't know it's under me now. Doesn't know anything. But all these other things, this ownership is taking place in my mental thought. And it's such an illusion because somebody says, okay, it's not my building anymore, it's yours. So I say, okay, it's my building. And then whoever the authority says, it's my building. So three people are saying three different words, right? The first person is saying, it's not my building. Then I'm saying it's my building. And then the authoritative person is saying, yes, it's your building. And three people are saying different words, and it makes a world of difference. It's a world of difference, right? Just when we feel we own something, it makes a world of difference. So there's definitely two creations here. The building on its own is absolutely fine. It's made, it doesn't even know anything. But the minute, again, I make that mental creation that, this is mine, and I own this, and this is amazing, that's called jīva sṛṣṭi. And this text is trying to establish that the bondage that we're feeling is not in Ishvara sṛṣṭi, it's in jīva sṛṣṭi. Because if we just change our attitude towards it, then we don't feel that bondage. So therefore it's established there are two creations. Now, what's going to happen is, he's saying, where is this jīva sṛṣṭi? What exactly is it? And what is it? What is bondage? Where is it coming from? Are you sure this bondage is coming from the mind, or is this bondage coming from the world? Are you sure? Where we're establishing that bondage is coming through Ishvara sṛṣṭi. But the question is, are you sure? Are you sure it's not coming from something else? So that's what we're going to start with today. Verse number 32. Anvaya vyatireka धीमयो जीव बन्धकृता सत्यस्मिन् सुख दुःखे स्तः तस्मिन् सति न द्वयम्. It says here, anvaya vyatireka bhyam. So by the method of co-presence and co-absence, dhimayaha jiva bandhakrita. The bondage, the bandha of jiva is dhimaya. It is in the mind. Sati asmin. When the mind is there, sukha dukkhe staha. Joy and sorrow are there. Tasmin asati. When the mind isn't there, then joy and sorrow aren't there. Nadvaya. So here, First, let's see one by one. It says, by the application of the double method of agreement and difference, we come to the conclusion that this mental creation, it is a mental creation which causes bondage to the jīva. For when these mental objects are there, pleasure and pain are also there. And when they are not, there is neither pleasure nor pain. So anvaya vyatireka, it means the method of co-presence and co-absence. Anvaya means co-presence, vyatireka means co-absence. And how this method works is you take something and you take another thing. And if you want to establish cause and effect relationship, then when this is there, this is there. And when this is not there, this is not there. And that's how you establish that this is the cause of this, right? So when A is, B is. When A is not, B is not. And then therefore, A is the cause of B. This is called method of co-presence and absence. So now we're going to think of establishing something, right? So when this person is there, there's a lot of noise. When this person is not there, there's no noise. Therefore, this person is the cause of noise. But it's always to be associated together, right? Invariable concomitants. Now here, when the mind is there, then I feel this bondage of joy and sorrow. And when the mind is not there, I don't feel it. Now see very clearly here, he says that bondage is not sorrow. Bondage is joy and sorrow. So that's also a very beautiful insight. Bondage is not sorrow. Bondage is joy and sorrow. Because these worldly joys, they only end up in sorrow. And sorrow can also turn into joy. What's causing us sadness is this constant flux, constant change, constant up and down. One moment, everything's fine. The next moment, boom, everything breaks down. One moment, everything is peaceful. Next moment, it's in pieces. One moment, everybody is in harmony, liking each other, wonderful together. And the next moment, there's fights everywhere. So this constant up and down, this joy and sorrow, up and down, this change is what we call samsara, bondage. Samyak sarati, it keeps flowing up and down. We get so tired and caught up by it. And that's what gets us bound, because we're just so caught up in change. And when the mind is there, this impacts us like anything. Joy and sorrow, joy and sorrow, joy and sorrow. It seems to impact us. But when the mind isn't there, I'm not feeling this bondage. We're not feeling bound by anything. We're not feeling up and down. We're not feeling opposing things. So he says here that it is the mind that's the cause, for sure. Now, a question arises that I don't think it's the mind. Why can't you say it's the world? Why can't you say, because if the world is there, then you have joy and sorrow, then you have bondage. And if the world is not there, then you don't have bondage. So why are you associating bondage with the mind and not with the world? World could very well be the source of bondage. So anticipating that question, now he brings this verse number 33. Asatyapi cha bahyarate swapnadau badhyate naraha samadhi supti murchasu satyapyasmin na badhyate. So he says, just see this. Swapnadau, we'll start from there. In dream, he gave 4 things. He gave 4 things in verse number 26. So swapnadau means in dream, etc. In dream, daydream, and illusion, in memory. Badhyate naraha. The individual is bound. In dream, memory, delusion, asati api cha bahyarte, even if there's no external objects. So in dream, somebody's bound even if there's no external objects. Samadhi supti murchasu, and in samadhi, in deep sleep, supti, in murcha, when somebody faints or somebody gets into a coma, sati api, even if the external world is seemingly there, na badhyate, one is not bound. So in dream, when external objects are absent, man is bound by the intellect to pleasure and pain, although outer objects are not perceived. And in deep sleep, in a faint, and in lower samadhi, no pleasure, pain is felt in spite of the proximity of outer objects. So we take this one by one. See, when we are dreaming, right? We are dreaming, we have no access to the external world, right? We are accessing the dream world. And when we are dreaming, we can experience bondage. That's why people have nightmares, right? They have nightmares. They experience bondage. Or they experience bondage in a way where they have the same recurring dream. Or in a way where they're dreaming of something so beautiful, but they don't want the dream to end. So even in dream, when we're not accessing external objects, there's still bondage. And even when people daydream, sometimes people are just sitting and they daydream about something, and all of a sudden they could be joyous, or all of a sudden they could remember something and be sad. Or memory has the capacity to bring bondage. People have traumatic experiences sometimes, and they recall things that they experienced 30 years ago, 10 years ago. And what they do in memory is they keep replaying it, replay. And they're not accessing the outside world necessarily, but they're accessing their memory. And through accessing their memory, they're feeling that bondage. So that's also something very, very different. Or when somebody's deluded, bhranti, like they see a snake on the rope. The snake is actually not there, but they feel fear. They're scared. They're afraid. So this is saying that even if somebody's not experiencing the outside objects per se, there can still be bondage. There can still be bondage because our very own mind creates it. Our very own mind creates it. And he says, and on the other hand, even if the external world still seems to exist around you, it doesn't mean that you will have bondage, because you can go into samadhi. So even if you're sitting and the external world seems to exist around you, if one goes into samadhi and their mind's absorbed, they don't feel bound at all. We've heard of stories like Ramana Maharshi ji, and he's sitting in the Patala Guha. He's sitting underground, and termites are biting into his skin. And still, he didn't feel a thing. He didn't feel anything. So even if the external world's seemingly still there, he didn't feel bondage. And somebody could be sleeping. When you're sleeping, you don't feel that bondage. Or somebody could faint. Someone could all of a sudden faint or be in coma. You're not feeling it. So the world is not the cause of bondage. Because even if one doesn't access the world like in dream, they can still feel bondage. And even if one is in the world, they can still feel without bondage. These are all different examples, but this is why people drink. This is why people, take drugs, is because being in the world, they don't want to feel that bondage. They numb the mind. They numb the mind. So therefore, it's being established here that, listen, this bondage does not belong to the world. It doesn't matter whether the world exists or not. But this bondage very clearly belongs to the mind. Because when the mind is there, we feel that bondage. And when the mind is not there, we don't. So, mind is the cause, bondage is the effect. They are co-present and they are co-absent. But what we have to fix is not the outside world. What we have to fix is our very own minds, our very own minds. And we started this text, saying that, yes, we do want to come to that level of consciousness, but what's always distracting us or pulling us away is really our own minds. And therefore, when we come to acknowledge and accept that this is what we have to fix, then life becomes much easier. We're not trying to fix outside things anymore. See, there's 3 levels. The 3 levels are what we call paristhiti, manasthiti, and atmasthiti. And I'll translate that. Paristhiti means that I live my life by trying to fix outer circumstances. That is my state. My state is, for me to get peace, I'm always fixing the outside. Paristhiti. I'm fixing the outside. So, I want more peace, so I'll remodel my apartment, or I'll move to a new location, or I'll make new friends, or I'll get some new clothes, or buy some lovely food. Always trying to fix the outer circumstances to make themselves peaceful. This is the first level, paristhiti. And that person who's always there is just going to go crazy, because how much can you fix outer circumstances? There's definitely things we cannot control. The next level up is called manasthiti. Those who fix their minds to gain a sense of peace. And this chapter is kind of hinting at that. They fix their minds to get a sense of peace because to some extent, we can control the mind. To some extent, we can control it, right? We can create our own mental world to be in a place that we don't want to be in, maybe. It's called manasthiti. There are great examples of this, like Nelson Mandela. Imagine Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. And those prison conditions were not great at all. They didn't have proper food, not proper clothes to wear. It was not sanitary. They didn't have amenities, proper amenities. But he had to live through that. So his outer circumstance, he knew he couldn't change. But what he did was he changed his mind. And he studied and he read. And still he worked from his prison. So he completely lived on his mental world. He used his mental world because his physical world, he really couldn't change. He couldn't accept. And, we have also other examples like there's this Chinese professor. He was in Beijing University. And at that time, in the Maoist regime, he basically lost his job and he was sentenced to live in a cowshed for months altogether. Now, that was his outer circumstance. But how did he live there? He actually ended up translating the Ramayana in Chinese, the scripture Ramayana in Chinese, and that's how he kept his mind alive and well. So there are some people who have these kinds of minds which are really strong, that even if they're in severe circumstances like I'm speaking, like a jail, a prison cell, or living in a cowshed, they're able to work with their minds. But there's one level even deeper, and eventually this text is going to that deeper level called Atmasthiti. We begin to realize that at the highest level, there's only so much we can do with the mind. Right? We can control it and tame it to a certain extent. But after that, you just gotta go beyond it. Just gotta go beyond it. And whatever happens, happens. Atmasthiti. That is for a mind that has become very sattvic, become very subtle, become very single-pointed. That mind has the ability to realize the self and reside in Atmasthiti. And when one is just remaining as the self, there's no need to control. There's no need to change, to transform, to make, to do, because it's just really being. It's just really gonna flow. There's no will anymore to even want to do anything, really, because what for? So in this way, that bondage really resides in the mind, resides in one's mind. And if we can take care of our minds, then we can take care of this bondage. That Atman is free. It's without bondage, without freedom, without bondage, because its nature is free. So it doesn't have to be free because it was never bound. But to realize that, we have to come to have this kind of strong, serene, peaceful, positive mind. Now, he's going to explain through an example. He said, first, I have given you logic. That when the mind is, then bondage is. And when the mind is not, then bondage is not. But he says, I'm going to give you a really solid example to illustrate this. So we're going to read 34 and 35 together. Okay. Duradesham gate putre jivatyevatra tatpita vipralambhakavakyena mritam matva praroditi mritepi tasmin vartayam ashrutayam naroditi atas sarvasya jivasya bandhakrinmanasam jagat. He says, now, durdesham gate putre. So imagine now a father and his son has gone to a faraway land. Durdesham gate putre. Jivati eva. Jivati eva. And he's living. He's fine. He's okay. He's in good health, good shape. He's gone to a faraway land. But atra here, tat pita, his father, vipralambhaka vakyena. There was somebody, vipralambhaka, means somebody who's cunning, wants to create trouble. by the words of this cunning person, Vakena, mritam matva praroditi, he thought that his son had died, and therefore he started crying. So imagine a scenario like this, right? So the father is staying there, and his son is in a faraway place and working and all of that. Now, somebody who wants to cause trouble tells the father, hey, your son died. Your son passed away. Now, the son is alive, huh? But he tells the father, your son passed away. And that father cries, is so sad, incredibly troubled that his son passed away. Now, what happened there? The son is alive. Nothing happened to the son. Huh? But the father is so sad because the mental creation happened. A mental creation of sadness happened. Somebody told him, your son died. Now, on the other hand, mrite api. Think of another scenario where mrite api. Now, somebody's son died. Huh? Tasmin vartayam ashrutayam. But the father never heard about it. He never heard that his son died. Naroditi, so he doesn't cry. He's fine. He's happy. He thinks everything's okay. His son died, but he never heard it. So he's totally, completely fine. So what is the cause? Is it the death? Or is it the attachment to the son? See, many people are dying every day. No, we're not crying all the time for death. But if somebody we know who's close to us dies, then that's the time we cry. People lose their property every day. You know, there's fire, there's hurricane, there's all kinds of things. We're not getting panicked. We're not distraught. But the minute it is my house, my property, boom. So where is the bondage? Huh? I'm sure you know the famous story where the house was burning and the son runs to the father and says, the house is burning. The father says, it's okay, I sold it. So we don't have to worry about it. I sold it, it's fine. And then the second son comes. The house is burning. The father says, yeah, remember, I sold it. I gave you the paperwork. The second son says, no, the paperwork didn't go through. And all of a sudden, the father's like, oh my God, the house is burning. Right? Because he takes it to be his. So that is a direct example that the bondage is not outside. It's ours. It's in our own mind. Now, one thing we can also think about here is how did Jivan Mukta handle this, right? Somebody who's liberated while living or enlightened being. If somebody close to you dies, are you not going to feel sad? So here, remember, for somebody who's enlightened, there's no sense of ownership. The sense of ownership is what gives us sadness, really. There's no sense of ownership that this person belongs to me or this thing belongs to me. This relationship belongs to me. Everything is Bhagavan's. Everything is God's will. We are just merely here. And if we have to take care of something, we take care. And if it has to go, it has to go. If it has to come, it has to come. There's nothing we can do. So for Jiva and Mukta, this sense of ownership is not there. It's not there. Okay, how a doubt comes and says, well, I understand now that bondage is a mental creation. I think your school, O Advaitin, is just like the Vijnanavadin Buddhist school. I think maybe you have the same school. You have the same thoughts. Maybe you have the same school. So here now, as an objection which is raised, saying that the Advaitin is thinking probably the same thing as the Vijnanavadin. So let's see this objection in verse 36. Vijnanavadopahyartha vayarthyat syat idam iti chet bahyartha vayartat syad iheti chet na hridyakaramadhatum bahyasyapekshitatvatah. Okay. Vijnana Vada. So, for the Vijnana Vada, Bahyartha, that external object, Vayarthyat, there's no external object. Syat iha iti chet. Is it the same as that? Is it the same as that where the Vijnana Vada says that there's no external object? Na hridyakaram adhatum bahyasya pekshitatvatah. No, the Advaitin says no, because we need that external object, bahyasya apekshitatvatah, to make the internal modification, hridhi akaram adhatum, for getting that internal modification. So, objection. This amounts to pure idealism and it deprives external objects of all significance. Reply, no, because we accept the fact that external objects give shape to the modifications of the mind. So here, first of all, the Vijnanavadin, their school of Buddhism, and their belief is that there is no external object. There's actually no external object. So there's no external bottle. There's no external book. There's no external computer. It is just a creation, a mental creation of your own mind. There's actually nothing here. It's a mental creation of your own mind. This is the school of, one of the schools of Buddhism. Now, what does Vedanta say? What does Advaita Vedanta say? Advaita Vedanta says, listen, we have different degrees of reality. We have different degrees of reality. One is called the pratibhasika satta, which is like a dream, like an illusion. So that state is like an illusion. It's a dream. The other one is called vyatireka satta. It's transactional reality. And the third one is called paramarthika satta, absolute reality. When we talk about dream, it is in that illusory realm. When we talk about transactional world or transactional reality, in Advaita Vedanta, it says that there are two creations in transactional reality: the creation of the jīva and the creation of Ishvara. Because for the simple reason that you and I, we cannot mentally create a tree, or we cannot mentally create the sun or the sky or the wind. We can't mentally create that. So there is an external creation by Ishvara. The external creation is done by the total mind. It's not done by you and me. It's done by the total mind has created this world. Has created this world, has made the sun, moon, the stars, the planets, the multiverse, the grass, all of the animals, the plants. The cosmic intelligence, Ishvara, has created this external world, because you and I cannot, even if you want to try to mentally project it, you cannot. So Ishvara creates that external world, but Jiva creates the internal mental world, right? This is intransactional reality. But from the absolute standpoint, remember that both are in consciousness. Both are appearances in consciousness. Both are appearances. So Advaita Vedanta never says that your mind creates the world. No. The total mind creates the world. But both the individual mind and total mind are appearances in consciousness. So at the end of the day, the substratum is pure consciousness. At the end of the day, everything is an appearance. But when we come to transactional reality, this is our view. So there's a difference. There's a difference. For the Vijnanavadit, Bahyartha Vyatireka. They say that there is just no external creation. It's just your mind. But we are saying, yes, there is an external creation, and that's how we experience it. There's a tree, and we experience it. There's a land, and that we experience it. There's a bottle, we experience it, right? In transactional reality. But remember, from the absolute standpoint, everything is taking place in consciousness. Everything is taking place in consciousness, right? So we'll stop with this today. More objections will come up. As I told you, this section is a lot of objection, reply, objection, reply. More objections will come up, which are very interesting. But for today, we'll stop here. Let's just maybe take a moment to recap, right? The thought flow so far. So what happened here, as we saw today, is that first we established that there are two creations. There's the bottle, actual bottle, which is known through the mind, and there's a thought bottle, which is known through sṛṣṭi, right? So there's the actual Ishvara sṛṣṭi and the jīva sṛṣṭi. Then what happens here is that we're trying to establish, where is bondage actually? Is it in the mind, or is it in the world? Is it in jīva sṛṣṭi or in Ishvara sṛṣṭi? Because that's ultimately our question. If we know where bondage is, then we can fix it. So we found that when the mind is there, then there's bondage, joy, and sorrow. And when the mind is not there, then there's no bondage. But hold on, there's an objection raised, right? That why can't it be the world? When the world is there, then bondage is there. When the world is not there, then no bondage. Because the direct correlation of bondage is not with the world, but it's with the mind. Because in dream, even if you're not experiencing the external world, we're still creating bondage in our mind. In dream, in delusion, in daydream, all of these states, we're still creating bondage in our mind. And at the same time, we could be in the world, but if we're sleeping, we don't even feel bondage. So bondage has nothing to do with the world. Our effort should not be towards fixing the world, but really fixing our own minds. And then he gives an example to really hit home with this, that the father, if his son was hale and hearty and somebody came and told him that your son died, he would be miserable, even if the son was alive. And on the other hand, if the father's son died and he didn't know, he would be totally happy, even if the son is dead. So the bondage is not in death. It's not in disease. It's not in, destruction. It's really when I associate with that. And then he brings up an objection that your school is like the Vijnanavadits of the Buddhists, because they believe that everything is a mental creation. And the Advaita Vedanta says, no, in the transactional reality, we do believe there's two creations, Ishvara's creation and Jiva's creation. And that there is something known as Ishvara's creation. But at the end of the day, both are appearances in consciousness. Right? Okay. Then the closing prayer. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.